Hi, this is Simona Perry. I am the Ogeechee Riverkeeper in Savannah, Georgia. I'm also on the board of the Pipeline Safety Coalition. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to present this evidence from my own experience as an ethnographic field researcher today. In addition, I presented the judges with a set of documents entitled PPT Evidence and Source Files that includes background documents related to the research I'll summarize here today, independent testimony from public source that can be my violation, 38 white constitutional reports on the various issues being addressed in this tribunal, 19 legal case documents, and 29 peer-reviewed published articles from anthropologists, sociologists, political scientists, and human rights scholars. I've also presented a series of spreadsheets that could serve to guide investigators and judges to uncover more evidence of the widespread disregard for human rights by governments and private entities seeking to exploit oil and gas resources and carry them to market. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of this material, and I encourage the judges and legal experts to take a closer look at all of this evidence. I want to start with a brief interview that was done from Pennsylvania, and it's pretty much self-explanatory.
We moved to Aston in 2011 because it was a nice neighborhood and close by media, but it didn't have the same housing prices as it does there. I've been a paralegal for 12 years. Most of that time I spent doing workers' compensation, claimant work, so helping people with their everyday lives and their claims on a daily basis. I like that work because it's emotionally rewarding. It's nice to be able to help people. I found out about the Mariner East pipelines via Facebook one day. I was on one of the local pages and saw some posts from Middletown Coalition about it. And so I joined the group, started to pay more attention to what was going on. I'm just on Facebook as everybody else is. Once I saw a map from Middletown Coalition, I realized it was coming through Aston. And I found that to be really concerning because it's only half a mile from my house. The major thing that I found concerning was the safety of my son. Being in such close proximity to a pipeline of that nature that has odorless, colorless, high-pressured contents in it was really concerning. I mean, even if there's not an immediate ignition scenario, I mean, that's got an asphyxiation risk. We travel across Dut Mill Road every day. You live in your community, but it took a while, I think, for me to fully understand the gravity of the situation. But once I was aware of it, I went to a Middletown meeting, one of the coalition meetings. It's been really difficult being the only person, it felt like, for a long time in Aston that either knew or was concerned at all. I felt like I was the only voice in Aston for a long time. Nobody here was really talking about it at all. I made several inquiries for information about the pipeline from probably every commissioner in the township. There were 7. Nobody responded to the questions that I had. I wanted to know when there had been public comment before the township sold the easement to Sunoco. I wanted to know how much money they received. I wanted to know what they did with that money. I also wanted to know if they received any safety information from Sunoco, like if they had had any idea what was even in the pipeline they sold an easement for. After several weeks of no replies, I filed a right to know request. A right to know request is a Pennsylvania equivalent of the Federal Freedom of Information Act. You can file a request for certain documents with local municipalities, with state government entities, things like that. In my right to know request, I asked for any and all documents concerning the sale of the easement, including written correspondence concerning negotiations. I asked for information about how much money we received, what the township did with the money that they received, and also for any safety-related information that they received from Sunoco. I filed that request on February 13th, 2017. I received a timely response within 5 business days requesting a 30-day extension that cited legal review as the cause, and they're within their rights to do that. After I received the request for the extension, I never heard from them again. They let their 30 days expire, and when that happens, your request is considered denied. At which point I filed an appeal to the State Office of Open Records, who issued me a final determination on May 1st, granting my request for the records. I have not gotten my information. The township ignored basically a judicial order from the state to turn over the records. The only recourse at that point is to file a lawsuit in the Court of Common Pleas to enforce the final determination. It's basically like filing for contempt. I definitely intend to file. I think the township has ignored my right to know request because there are certain conflicts of interest amongst the elected officials there. One of the commissioners is a Sunoco retiree. Another of the commissioners is the uncle of one of the Sunoco spokesmen. The solicitor for the township works at a firm that's represented Sunoco, and yet she gets to do legal review of residents' right to know requests when they concern a different client of hers. I mean, to me, those are conflicts of interest. My legal experience was useful in the process, but when you get to the point where you have to file in the Court of Common Pleas, that's a little above my pay grade, especially where it concerns municipal law. It's cost prohibitive to the average person, you know. I was fortunate enough to find an organization who's going to represent me, Penn Future. If it wasn't for them, I don't know how I would be able to do it. I don't know that we'll be able to stop it. I'd like to. One of the other things that's important to me as far as Mariner goes, and not necessarily Mariner 2, is the proximity of Mariner 1 to Pennell. Once I became aware of Mariner 2, it naturally led me to find out about Mariner 1, which has already been operational in Aston for 2 years. Mariner 1 runs down Route 452 in Aston, which is a pretty heavily traveled road. And it's also 400 feet from Pennell Elementary School, where my son's supposed to go to kindergarten next year. Mariner 1 has also had 3 leaks in the last year. School is not ready. School's not ready at all.
So that's just one example of thousands of people across Pennsylvania and across the country, the United States, being impacted by pipeline infrastructure directly related to the Marcellus Shale and unconventional fracking activities. One of the things that I wanted to really point out in this brief presentation is that the lack of trust that residents have is obvious. And it's because of the lack of information that's available to them, and also the lies that they've been told about the safety of this type of activity. And the industry is well aware of this lack of trust. In 2012, they commissioned a report by a consulting firm called Control Risk, entitled "The Global Anti-Fracking Movement: What It Wants, How It Operates, and What's Next." And in that report, they found that the global opposition to fracking was really the primary threat to shale gas development. And they analyzed all the political and security risks. And basically, their outcome was that the industry needed to do more to create more winners. By creating more winners, what they meant was creating benefits from development that are tangible. And they said, had to do with well-paying jobs that were there for 2 or 3 years of drilling or more. Their concepts of winning really had nothing to do with equitable, fair, or just voice in the process of fracking or outcomes. Certainly it did not have to do with the human rights of local communities. Across North America, we've seen this. I wanted to just highlight one particular thing that happened in around 2013, October. The First Nations community of the Litsquattog, I probably don't say that right, in New Brunswick, there were protests. They blocked the road to a Southwest Energy site. They claimed that site was on illegally taken indigenous lands. They were told by the government to leave. They refused. There were at least 40 people who were arrested. There were Molotov cocktails thrown. There was tear gas and rubber bullets that were used on the blockaders. So the industry in the US and North America refuses to be transparent. They have refused to allow community concerns to be aired. And they think that public relations and community outreach stunts will work. And this is another example of that I wanted to share with you. During and after an accident at a Chevron Appalachia well site in southwestern Pennsylvania in February of 2014, where one worker lost his life and one was critically injured, Chevron's response to the local community was to mail out gift certificates to a local pizza parlor. And this was construed by the local people in living there really as an affront, as lack of regard for their lives, and really a lack of understanding the seriousness with which they took their own lives and the risks that were posed by having these developments in their backyard. So the field research I've presented to the judicial panel has been collected from over a dozen researchers, journalists, and myself since 2009. And it really focuses on how rural communities are grappling with the implications of these developments, and also suburban and urban folks, as you saw in that video. It's about their own words and their everyday lives, and their rights being violated. In order to provide context, I've included, and I'm not probably going to talk about it in depth because I thought it was more important to hear a voice from the field itself, information about the context in which I did my own research starting in 2009 in a rural place in Pennsylvania. 63,000 residents live in Bradford County, where I did the work. And the pace and scale of the shale gas development in this county has been off the charts. In Pennsylvania, it's been incredible. But in this one county, in 2009, when I started my work there, there were 103 gas wells. And by June of 2012, little snapshot in time, there were 1,788 new permitted gas wells in this county. Today, there are over 2,000 permitted gas wells in this one county with 63,000 souls. And most of the people who live there traditionally have been dairy farmers, timber workers, and some small industry. The amount of water, land, and other raw materials that would be necessary to support this type of development, the pace of the development, the type of workers necessary, the amount of money that was being offered to landowners, the amount of money being invested into this development is really off the charts and out of scale with anything else development-wise in Pennsylvania, even though Pennsylvania already has, 50,000 wells already. This unconventional fracking is a different monster. So this just goes through some of the local impacts that we documented during my research in the county. It's kind of a snapshot of and an example of what's happening all over rural places where this kind of development is occurring. I conducted over 100 interviews and also did focus groups. And really clearly, I want to make the point that there's no one here who's talking about this from this project because they feel threatened. They don't feel comfortable going out and speaking anymore about their concerns. And actually, they've kind of given up. A lot of them have done work in sharing their information with New York State and other states in the US, even internationally. But they really want to keep their identities a little more private now. They've had retaliation from neighbors. They've had retaliation from their county government officials, and they've had retaliation from the industry. One of the things that leads to this is we found that more than a dozen, and we think there are probably many more in the county, were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements when they signed leases. So that's led to a big silencing. So in 2013, my own field work really shifted to look more at kind of the social and environmental justice implications of what I was learning. And it became clear really that, all of these central local impacts that were being documented were really all about how the local authorities and elected officials, even state agencies, were really dismissing the concerns and those impacts. And in the worst cases, people were being marginalized and threatened by what was happening to them. So this really is the heart of why I am here today. So I started asking people what justice means to them, what rights mean to them in this county. And it came across, it's very much an individual term, more akin to rights, and people think of it like that in this place. There's a clear concept of justice in three categories: morality, revenge, vengeance, and money. And when it comes to the morality and revenge, things such as threats to properties and future generations, and what that means for people's children and staying on their lands, which is their investment. It also goes to the characterization and labeling of landowners as extremists and activists by the actual state governments that are supposed to be regulating the industry in memorandum to state legislators about particular individual landowners, and it gives their addresses to the state legislators and labels them as extremists. It also goes to shenanigans been going on in the Pennsylvania legislature, trying to look at how medical gag orders, if you go in for something you think might be related to a gas industry impact, the doctor is actually not allowed to share that information with other medical professionals to maybe build a case about some kind of a group of people in a certain place that might be impacted. So the judges in Pennsylvania have ruled on that, and they've actually come out and said that this is a threat to future generations. It's a threat rivaling the environmental effects of coal extraction. And the last thing people talked about with rights in Pennsylvania, and Bradford County in particular, was with starting to feel so frustrated that they really wanted to take justice into their own hands. And what they meant by that was running as state representatives and filing lawsuits. But many of them, as you heard in the video, simply cannot afford to do those kind of things. So then it comes down to money and the legal system itself. I mentioned the non-disclosure agreements that people sign in their leases. The governor, Tom Corbett, the previous governor, started a Marcellus Shale Commission, supposedly to take an objective view of what the impacts were on the environment, human health, and communities and housing. That came out and there were fees imposed, but there's still no tax on the industry in Pennsylvania or other things being done. With that impact fee money, none of it's going to the actual impacts being seen at the local level. The other frustration people have is that there have been a lot of violations logged in Bradford County, for instance. In a snapshot from 2005 to 2013, there were 700 violations logged on 260 gas wells, but less than 200 of those have seen enforcement actions taken. And then also something really troubling to folks about, well, how do I get recognition of my problems in Pennsylvania, is over 285 water well complaints have been filed with the Department of Environmental Protection between 2008 and August of 2013, but less than 150 have actually been investigated and there have been a determination of cause. So just to go through this really quick, I think that one of the main points I want to make is people living in gas fields feel there's an injustice in the development and that their individual rights are being neglected and violated and they're not being listened to. The state's governance of these activities should have taken this into account, but instead they've been cast in some cases as the problem, unpatriotic and troublemakers. And justice rights are not only about the distribution of wealth or the benefits, about winners and losers, it's also about how people experience and conceptualize justice in their daily lives and in terms of all those things. And if you want to indulge me for 2 more minutes, I just wanted to tell you one brief story about, that's more of a personal nature, but I think it's important to the whole big picture, particularly in light of the global epidemic of truth seekers and research activists being targeted for elimination. My story is not that extreme, but I think it points to a trend that way in the United States. So in the fall of 2012, I was invited to give a public talk about my research in Bradford County. It was given at Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, Wilkes University. It was focused on some of the broader questions around my work, on how farmers were responding to the developments of Marcellus Shale, especially their rural livelihoods, their culture, community health, and personal health. An industry-funded group called Energy in Depth, which is, you can look them up, but they are funded by the American Petroleum Institute, the Independent Petroleum Association of America, El Paso Corporation, XTO Energy, Shell, BP, Occidental Petroleum, Anadarko, Marathon, Chevron, Encana, Talisman, Halliburton, Schlumberger, and the Ohio Oil and Gas Association. So this is a group that's funded by them. They call themselves grassroots truth seekers. And a couple of days later, a blog appeared after my talk on their website that sought to discredit me. And after I was angry, after that subsided, I debated with myself, and I also talked to many others about how or if to respond. I chose silence as my response. Nothing I could say would matter, I decided, since the entire Energy in Depth operation was first designed to discredit the 2010 documentary Gasland by Lost Fox. And then it's been since then used to attack study after study or anyone who asks questions about the true costs of shale gas development. So in the end, I concluded that this Energy in Depth campaign was really, they're just a bunch of corporate bullies. And they're very cleverly disguised as grassroots and truth seekers. They just conduct smear campaigns on anyone they think might pose a threat to unfettered oil and gas development. So I chose to ignore the bully. But despite this, I've been left a little disturbed and nauseous as I watch other researchers being attacked like this. It's not about my own reputation, but it's about the very real human cost being paid each day by local people and the energy being expended by these companies to shut up the truth. This experience made me double down in my efforts to do all we can to ensure that those whose rights are being violated, their voices are not being heard, that they are being recognized and protected. Because when it came down to it, I was not all that surprised about the industry attacking me. Because for 3 years, I had, and ever since then, I've witnessed the shale gas industry, their supporters in Bradford and elsewhere across Pennsylvania, Colorado, Texas, try to publicly discredit and launch personal attacks on farmers, foresters, housewives, workers when they raise concerns or simply ask questions about how shale gas developments would impact their own land, their water, their children's health, their livelihoods, and their communities. What troubled me was the fact that would see blatant disregard for the true cost the industry has on people's lives and their children's lives. So my question and why I'm participating in this is, what will it take to stop this? That's why I joined this effort with Tom and the steering committee. I hope it makes a real and a lasting difference across the world in finally bringing hope and justice to those who have been silenced for far too long. Thank you.
Questions?
There's a question from Professor Barreda. I'm going to translate his words.
En Estados Unidos, como una herencia del periodo de Bush y de Cheney,
in the United States, coming from the period of Cheney Bush in the presidency,
dejó un abanico muy extendido de iniciativas industriales petroleras muy agresivas.
There was a wide scope of oil initiatives, very aggressive.
La iniciativa de los biocombustibles.
The biofuels initiative.
En Canadá, en Alberta, la iniciativa del tar sand.
In Alberta, Canada, the tar sands initiative.
El megaducto Excel, ¿no?
The pipeline Excel.
Los accidentes en el Golfo de México, que también están ligados a Halliburton.
The Gulf of Mexico accidents that are linked to Halliburton.
De manera que estas agresiones ligadas al fracking,
so these aggressions linked to fracking,
pertenecen a un movimiento muy amplio, muy grande,
belong to a big movement
de crisis energética de Estados Unidos,
of energy crisis in the United States,
de pérdida del control de los hidrocarburos en el mundo,
of loss of control of hydrocarbons in the world.
Mi pregunta es si yo desgraciadamente apenas comencé a participar ayer como juez.
Unfortunately, I started only yesterday to take part as a judge.
Entonces, mi pregunta es si en el curso de este juicio se ha hecho esta contextualización del problema, esta contextualización general.
My question is if through this time that there have been sessions, this contextualization of the problem has been made.
Claro, están, digamos, toda la explotación del carbón en los Apalaches, que ayer también se mencionó.
Of course, there's the coal exploitation in the Appalachians that was mentioned yesterday.
Y a esto habría, digamos, que sumar lo que es la tradicional contaminación y agresión petrolera en el sureste de los Estados
And
Unidos.
we will have to add to this the traditional pollution from oil extraction in the south
Petroquímica.
and petrochemical pollution in the southeast of the United States.
You're on mute, Simona.
I think it froze when the question was asked. I don't know if I got the gist of the question. In terms of the context of this related to the cumulative nature of what's happening, that's all I got from it. So there was a freeze. Frame.
Conversación.
Sí, la pregunta es si,
The question is,
si dentro de la parte acusadora
if on the part of the petitioners,
se ha realizado este contexto general, ¿no?
this general context has been,
It froze again.
the question is if on the part of the petitioners, this general context has been put forward in the course of these sessions.
Oh. Is that a question for the larger tribunal?
Pues puede ser.
Because I'm only a little piece of it, and I have not been able to participate in the other sessions either, or watch them yet. I believe that as part of the steering committee for this, that, you know, one of the ideas is to bring all these divergent voices together in one place. And they're not divergent in the sense of what they're struggling with, that's the commonality. And I think by highlighting the commonalities of our struggles and those of us who are kind of documenting those struggles, maybe have a portfolio of cases and evidence to then sort through and look at specific ways to solve this crisis, at least to bring solace and justice to the folks whose rights have been violated in various ways. I mean, you can talk about workers' rights here, which we don't, but we should, in terms of if you're talking about the Gulf Coast, people working on rigs, offshore rigs, you know, what is their voice? So there's lots of different pieces to this. And I think you're trying to ask how it's all going to be put together. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding?
And if that is the question, how does it all fit together, particularly in the U.S.? We have not looked at the whole big oil and gas, fossil fuel, including coal, context and sort of framed it all together yet. But in this afternoon's session with the attorneys and the judges, that would be a rich issue to bring up. And I hope you expect to be there this afternoon so that you could raise that question personally. Thank you for asking.
It's an important question.
Yeah.
Could I ask, it's Gil Beringer here. You said there were 7 commissioners, and you mentioned that 3 of them, 2 perhaps indirectly and 1 directly, had conflicts of interest. That's a minority. What about the other 4? Well, I should ask, are those 3 the dominant ones on the commission? Do the other 4 just go along with it, or?
I'm not sure what exactly was the experience of the woman who was interviewed in Southeast Pennsylvania.
Sorry.
Yeah, but it's a great question, because that is one of the issues, is that all of these small townships are different. And So it's been my observation that the industry in Pennsylvania in particular has taken advantage of that, and that they leverage within the commission's decision-making authorities at the county level. They try to get influence, and we've documented this. I've documented this in Bradford County by either placing people who have worked for the industry in a position where they have specific direct line to a decision maker, or they hire away county officials, county staff, I should say, to work for the industry. So that now there's this, kind of connection now about the county operating and the industry operating. We also have seen where they will actually cut sweet deals with county commissioners and township supervisors on leases on their property to do right-of-ways. So there's a money thing involved with that as well. But it varies across the country, and it varies across each state in the United States about how those local levers of power are being played by the industry. And myself and several other sociologists, ethnographers, and political scientists have been looking at that. We don't have answers about it at all, except that we know it's pervasive in the sense that the industry uses that to manipulate government decision-making, at the local level in particular. At the state level, it's more about lobbying, high-powered lobbyists, and influence in that way.
Thanks. I'm particularly interested because I was born and raised in Delaware County.
There you go.
I know something about local politics there.
Right. I encourage you to take a look at all of those interviews. They are on the Mariner East website that they put together. They're excellent interviews on all different topics. I think there are about 30 there. And Hugh would love for, if you have a chance to take a look at some of those. I put that in the spreadsheet that I circulated, that link. So you have it now.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.